would have a saucer of beans and corn relish and leftover biscuits and breakfast. After dinner, we would return to the stripping house and continue the same procedure. We would go to the house and Mom would fry a big pan of potatoes and bake some cornbread. We'd do our chores. My job was to carry in the coal. And then we would all sit down in the front room and Dad would read The Progressive Farmer and Mom would patch. That means to mend clothes. Or on my favorite occasions, when they weren't too tired, we'd play games. Dad would often challenge me to a game of fox and geese. Fox and geese was a board game played with 2 buttons for foxes and 24 grains of corn. The object of the game was for the geese to pin up the foxes. The foxes could jump and the geese could not. I preferred being the geese. As I remember it, Dad usually won, but I didn't care because Dad would have such a happy smile on his face. Then it would be bedtime, about 8 o'clock. We would sleep under about 5 or 6 quilts in case the fire got low. But my favorite snow days were when tobacco was not in cage. The day would begin the same way, but after breakfast, when it was discovered that tobacco was not in case, it was very different. Mom would pull the sewing machine in by the fire, and she would get 3 or 4 boxes or bags of scrap material out of the closet. We would then begin to cut quilt pieces for her. She would sew them together on her sewing machine. On these occasions, she taught Janice and I to make string quilts. Carol was too little.
Carol never got to do anything.
She was always too little. These days were more relaxed. After a while, we could stop to make some popcorn and some Tough Jack and some popcorn balls, or maybe some snow cream. Snow cream was made by gathering a dishpan full of snow, stirring in cream and sugar, and a generous amount of vanilla. And then we would all get a spoon and dig in. In the afternoon, we would bundle up and go play in the snow. Or we'd make snowmen, throw snowballs, or slide over the bank in a cardboard box. We never had any sleds. I do remember on one occasion Dad made a sled for us. As everyone who knew him remembers, Mom always said that moss couldn't make a hog trot. But the sled was so heavy that you had to pull it down the hill. So after pulling it around for a while, we abandoned it and went back to our cardboard boxes. But there was one time when Carol reminded me about this, when we took our coats and turned them inside out and slid down on our coat linings. But we only did that once. Mom didn't like that.
We almost got in trouble for doing that.
You should have.
It was fun, though.
When we were chilled to the bone, we would go inside, we'd put on some dry clothes and return to piece and quilt. When evening came, we would settle down on the couch and Mom would read to us. 2 of my favorites were Heidi and the 5 Little Peppers and How They Grew. And the next day, there was sure to be school. We'd get all bundled up, including galoshes. I hated those. But the only other person I knew who wore them was only 2 people I knew. It was Mom and Clary Lovett. And we would then walk out to the tubs and we'd wait for the bus for about an hour. The bus never showed up. So we'd go back home in tears to learn that the buses was running on main roads only. School was in session, but we'd been left behind. I'm not sure whether I was more upset about not going to school or I was worried that tobacco was going to be in case again. Job in the world.
Wash.
Janice said it wasn't supposed to be wash day, it's supposed
Wash.
to be wash day.
You called taters potatoes too. I don't understand that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You messed up.
I did mess it up. Well, wash day. Wash day was a very important day. It came one day every week, and the day depended on the weather. Fair weather was very important. Mom told me that in the early days of her married life that she would haul her babies and her laundry to the creek on a sled, wash everything on a washboard, and haul it home again. Thank the Lord, if there had been enough rain, you could just carry it from the tubs, kept under the drip of the house.
And the
If it
barrel.
had been dry, you had to carry it from the spring. The spring was down a well-worn path about a quarter of a mile. It was a beautiful rock-covered hole of the best tasting water anywhere in the country. After the kettle was full, Mom would build a fire under it and heat the water to boil it. While it was heating, it was time to set up the washing machine. This was done by rolling the old wringer washer out from its spot on the front porch to about the middle of the porch between the swings. Then the bench, a bench with only 2 legs and no back, usually kept behind the kitchen table to sit on while eating, was carried out and placed beside the washer. 2 number 2 wash tubs was placed on it, and now it's time to carry water again and fill up all of these. By the time all this was done, the water in the kettle would surely be hot. Then Mom would carry enough hot water to add to the washing machine. She wouldn't let us carry the hot water. She'd add enough to make the temperature just right for washing clothes, and just enough was added to the rinse water to knock off the chill. Next, a large white brown dish pan was filled with hot water and a generous amount of Clorox was added. This was placed beside the rinse tub for clothes that didn't come clean. Now the dirty clothes were carried from the dirty clothes basket located in the back closet. They were piled in a large pile on the front porch. Then Mom sorted it. I don't ever remember having this job. I was only allowed to help. Had to be right. You started washing with the best clothes first, and you worked your way down to Dad's old dirty work clothes. The same water was used for all the laundry. Remember, we had just carried all this water. The procedure went like this. I think I lost the page. When the washing time was up, you had to put the clothes through the wringer into the first rinse tub. A wringer is 2 rollers about 12 inches long that turn around and squeeze the water out of the clothes. You were taught to have a respect for the wringer by being told stories of people who had lost their fingers and arms and hair in ringers. And when you were first learning to use a wringer, you had to push the clothes through with a flat stick. Clothes could not be put into a wringer just any old way. Shirts were put in by the collar, dresses by the top, towels by the end. If anything too thick was placed in a wringer, it would release automatically. When the clothes were in the first rinse tub, you had to check to see if anything had stains on it, and if it did, you put it in the Clorox water for just long enough to remove the stain. Most clothes could be bleached in those days. The clothes were then rinsed by hand and had to be put through the wringer into the second rinse water. In this tub, you had to check to see if anything needed to be starched. Lots of things did, including pillowcases. And if it did, you had to put it through the wringer and set it aside to be placed in a dishpan of liquid starch. The starch was made in a big pot on the kitchen stove by Mom. It contained flour and water and looked just like the paste she made for hanging wallpaper, only it was thinner. It was then squeezed through a straining rag into water. More starch had to be added throughout the day. After all the clothes were wrung from the second rinse tub into dishpans in a big aluminum pot, you carried them to the clothesline. Any dark clothes was hung on the porch so that the sun wouldn't fade. Then the clothespin bag had to be worn around your neck, and pins were never to be left on the clothesline. The other clothes were hung on the wire lines in the yard. There's also a certain way you had to hang clothes.